then Goodfellas, directed by Martin Scorsese.
What's his name? What'd you say? Are you being a fucking wise guy with me? Huh?
I'm sorry.
What did I tell you?
I apologize.
What did I tell you? What did I tell you? You don't buy anything, you hear me? Don't buy anything.
I'm sorry.
That fuck, you ought to wear a sign.
I think Scorsese had a hand in the script. I mean, he always does creatively. One of the reasons he's a great director is like, and this is, he's not necessarily a writing director. He's not like necessarily a writer. I'm already getting, see how this is how I get like, I just go off. Scorsese is not necessarily a writer director, but he has always said in interviews, he's always been on record that like he works with the writer. I mean, in certain instances, he has writing credits on his films, to be clear. And I believe Goodfellas is one of those. He has always been on record that he needs to make sure the script is exactly what the movie is going to be. So he's a huge proponent of like, put it on the page and make sure it's there. And you can see like, I've read some of the screenplays for his films to compare what the finished film is versus the screenplay. And it's, you know, when he's working with writers, he really seems to push them to like make sure that like the script is what the movie will be. So that someone who's investing money or what have you, like isn't confused about what the movie will be because it's on paper. I think the thing he said once in an interview was like, put it all in the script. Something like, I put it all in the script, or we put it all in the script, something like that. But, okay. Based on a book written by Nicholas Pileggi. Nicholas Pileggi was not a gangster himself, but was in fact like a journalist. He wrote several books that Scorsese actually ultimately adapted into films. Goodfellas, the book is actually titled Wise Guy. I have it on my bookshelf in my room. He also wrote, Nicholas Pileggi also wrote the book Casino, which Scorsese, another amazing Scorsese movie. What's amazing to me about Casino is just how, like, the coverage isn't even the right word because it's not doing a service to the film visually. But to me, like, Goodfellas is the character-focused gangster film from Scorsese. Character and emotions focused. Something, like, I don't know, like, that's what Goodfellas is. And Casino is like the visual gangster epic. You know, it's sort of not in the way that like the Godfather films are, but Casino is insane visually. Like, to me, like, I just like the way he like packs the frame and the camera moves and the lighting and the way he just makes, the thing he's always good at is just making things visually interesting. Like, that's why Martin Scorsese is. It's funny that I'm saying in no particular order because Martin Scorsese is probably my favorite filmmaker ever. And to me, Goodfellas is almost like worth like 2 or 3 films on any given list. Like, it's that good. And that's why I don't think I have, that's not true. I do have multiple Scorsese films on this list. We'll get there. But Goodfellas is just, it's a near perfect movie. Like, if there is such a thing, and again, in art in general, there is no such thing as perfect. Perhaps there are like ideals, but there is no such thing as perfect necessarily. Goodfellas is a near perfect movie. The structure is nearly perfect. It never lags. There's never like there's never a moment that sort of bores you or puts you to sleep. It really, it's like 2.5 hours of just completely engaging like performances, editing, direction. It's just like it's incredible and iconic in a lot of ways. You know, I would say one of the things that definitely makes it iconic is Joe Pesci's performance and sort of his.
You're a fucking mumbling, stuttering little fuck. You know that?
Sort of like circus act, the sort of circus act that epic circus act that is his performance. I think Henry Hill, played by Ray Liotta, this is a film that, I mean, first of all, made Ray Liotta's career for sure. Also, fun fact about Goodfellas that I think is really interesting is that it wasn't a hit. It wasn't a hit when it came out, necessarily. Like, it wasn't a box office smash or anything. It sort of took some time for people to understand how meaningful it was culturally, which I think is just really interesting. And it's a good lesson in something perhaps being like ahead of its time. You know, sometimes movies come out and they're just a little bit ahead of their time. Like, this was the case with like Donnie Darko, for instance. Not that that's on my list. Granted, it's a great movie. But yeah, sometimes a movie will come out and it's so groundbreaking and so unlike anything that's come out previously. Another thing, and that's another thing I'll get to with Goodfellas that I think makes it... There's a lot of things that make it really culturally significant, but I like, Goodfellas changed the gangster genre. Like, the gangster genre, there is the gangster genre before Goodfellas, and then there is the gangster genre afterwards. So, you know, you have the Godfather films were really like a culmination of a particular, and that's even arguable, but the culmination of like a particular style of gangster movie, especially like visually in The Godfather for sure. There's all these remnants of like earlier gangster movies, because gangster movies have been around for a long time. Like, most people don't know that Scarface is like a remake, for instance. Granted, it's even arguable that Scarface is a gangster movie, but anyway, it just has like more of a feel of like an 80s crime action film. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the Godfather films, for instance, were like a culmination of a particular style of gangster drama that was where the gangsters were a lot more composed, I think is a good way to put it. The gangsters like were sort of sly, and they you know, they talked a certain way, and Goodfellas sort of disrupted that notion. Probably partly because Goodfellas is not... I think gangster films prior to Goodfellas had a more like literary basis. So, like, the Godfather films, for instance, are based on novels written by Mario Puzo. And Puzo wasn't writing about the mafia from, like, a journalistic standpoint. And we can get to the journalistic thing is really interesting because it's related to, like, Scorsese's whole filmography. But The Godfather, yeah, so The Godfather had a basis in literature, like fiction. Whereas, you know, Nick Pileggi's books, Nick was really writing about like real gangsters. Henry Hill was a real person. And so I think that's what made Scorsese probably the perfect director. And Scorsese pioneered, that's another thing, like probably why Goodfellas wasn't so well received, is like the voiceover and like the emphasis on just detail. You're like, wait, why are we... Scorsese's there's so much detail in this movie, in the narration, and there's so much subjectivity to the narration that you're quite literally in a person's head. You're in Henry Hill's head.
There was Jimmy and Tommy and me, and there was Anthony Stabile.
How you doing?
Frankie Carbone. And then there was Mo Black's brother, Fat Andy. And his guys, Frankie the Wop, Freddie No Nose. And then there was Pete the Killer, who was Sally Balls' brother. And you had Nicky Eyes.
What's up, guy?
And Mikey Francesi.
That guy, yeah, I want to see him.
And Jimmy Two Times, who got that nickname because he said everything twice, like...
I'm gonna go get the papers,
You know, almost to a fault, like but you become privy to everything about him. His drug addiction, you know, his sort of casual racism, his domestic abuse of his wife, and like you're really, and that's the thing that I think is so incredible about Scorsese is like Scorsese has, especially in like his definitely in his 90s films, like Scorsese is pairing sort of two things. He's pairing like this almost affinity for like a journalistic style. And that's why it's so interesting that he adapted a Pileggi book, because that's what Pileggi's role. Pileggi had the role of like the writer journalist, the journalist author. And so Scorsese, the style of Goodfellas like mimics that approach. And Goodfellas, it's almost like I remember I had a professor at USC, Todd Boyd, who's a fucking legend. Shout out to Todd Boyd. I don't think he'd ever see this video, but I took I think 2 of his classes at USC, and I was just obsessed with them. And he actually taught a class on the gangster genre, and I would just be like front row asking questions. I asked him a million questions. I don't know if he would remember me or anything, but I just was so obsessed with his class. Todd Boyd, by the way, has he's been in a ton of documentaries. He's been a talking head in a bunch of documentaries. Usually just about, as a cultural commentator, some of the documentaries are about movies. Some of them are about kind of hip hop culture and things. Todd Boyd is a fucking legend. Shout out to Todd Boyd. But I think Todd Boyd talked about how Scorsese's, it's almost like Goodfellas is almost like a how-to book of how to be a gangster. And that's why the movie spends so much time on details and processes, like how they, you find Henry Hill at certain points in the movie explaining in voiceover how they laundered money and how they just basically juiced the money out of businesses until they went completely bankrupt. How they robbed banks and there's an emphasis on process in Goodfellas that makes it almost a how-to kind of piece, which is just really, really interesting. But Scorsese is coupling sort of that journalistic integrity, that journalistic approach with his deep understanding and deep interest in the darker side of human nature, what someone might call the Jungian, the shadow self. That is a huge... Scorsese has been, has in interviews talked about how he is insistent on making movies about just the bad things inside of us. And he's insistent on reminding people that we all have evil within us.
You haven't even called or anything. Where have you been?
Well, Mom, I've been working nights.
And?
Well, tonight we were out late. We took a ride out to the country, and we hit one of those deers. That's where the blood came from. I told you. Jimmy told you before when I went to check. Anyway, it reminds me, I need this knife. I'm gonna take this. It's okay?
Okay, yeah.
I just need it for a
Bring
little
it back, though,
Well, the poor thing, I hit him in his, we hit the deer in his paw. What do you call it?
The paw.
The paw.
The foot.
The hoof. The hoof got caught in the grill.
Oh.
I gotta hack it off.
Ooh.
Ma, it's a sin. You gotta leave it there, So anyway, I'll bring your knife back if they do that. Anyway.
Delicious.
Thank you. Why don't you get yourself a nice girl?
I get a nice one almost every night, Ma.
Yeah, but get yourself a girl so you could settle down. That's what I mean.
settle down almost every night, but then in the morning I'm free. I love you. I wanna be with you.
It's not the evil's over there, and this is actually comes full circle with Goodfellas. It's not the evil is over there with someone else. It's internal. It's inside of us, which is what Carl Jung sort of espoused. With his Carl Jung's work on the persona and the shadow. The persona being the part of ourselves that we present, that is pleasing to society at large, and then the shadow being all the darker impulses, violence, all the darker sexual impulses, all these things within us that we sort of repress. And Carl Jung always talked about, and I think Scorsese has always been bent on sort of bringing the shadow to the surface. And that's what Goodfellas is. And Goodfellas quite literally starts that way. Because Henry Hill wasn't, Goodfellas is the quintessential Scorsese film, because it proves the thesis of evil being within. inherently, which is also sort of a Catholic idea, which may be related to the fact that Scorsese is Catholic, or was raised Catholic. But Henry Hill does not start out as a gangster. He's not like Michael Corleone, who the character, who's born into, in The Godfather, who's born into the mafia. Henry Hill was like, Henry Hill was like half Irish, half Italian, I believe. And he lived in a neighborhood where there were gangsters, and he saw them, and the only reason he aspired to be like them is because he saw them and saw how they always got their way, and they got whatever they wanted and had fun, and like being a gangster became this very glorious idea to him as like a young boy. That is what Scorsese has done in several films, including The Wolf of Wall Street, which is another great Scorsese flick. But Jordan Belfort, for example, in The Wolf of Wall Street, does not start out as this evil guy, but he has his shadow that he hasn't dealt with and wouldn't like to acknowledge, like most people don't like to acknowledge it. And so he gets sucked into something, and it's sort of unbelievable how a guy can sort of just be a human, just be a man, and become something much more sinister. But I think Scorsese's thesis, like personal and creative thesis, has always been that it's possible for anyone to become that sinister. It's within you. And if you don't necessarily like tame and acknowledge your shadow self, you can become that sort of sinister figure and become overshadowed by your shadow.
Yeah. Get the dog!
I don't even know how I could just go on and on literally about Goodfellas. I should probably just do a video just about Goodfellas at some point. But anyway, okay, moving on.